Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong link.
You're in the wrong group. I'm just going to minimize it, but I'll stay on in case you need me.
Okay.
Okay. Recording has started. So we've got quorum with Trustee Arndorfer. I know Trustee Stokbrand's trying to get in, so hopefully she can join us shortly. It is 6:03, and we will call to order Community and Business Relations Committee. Mr. Bart, can you take us away, please?
Okay, sure. Let me just start this. Can you all see my PowerPoint screen?
Yes.
Okay, so like I said, I have a brief introduction to this conversation as outlined in my memo. So just a history of where we're at today. The keeping of chickens is currently prohibited in the Village of Shorewood based on Code Section 192.17b. That is amongst other animal keeping related codes in the village. I could not find when that code was first introduced, but I do believe it's sometime between 1955 and 1978. Prior to then, I could find no history of whether or not chickens were even mentioned. But as we can see on the right-hand side of the screen here, we do have building permits in the property files in my office for chicken coops throughout the village, or at least this one here was on Newhall and Kensington. So in the past, they had been allowed, and then somewhere between 55 and 78, they were prohibited along with other animals of the nature seen here. The village board directed me back in February 2023 to bring this conversation to the Community Business Relations Committee. So here we are, someone coming in. So as outlined in the memo, communities near and farther away in Wisconsin and other places throughout the country have been allowing chickens in recent years. The benefits have been noted to be urban agriculture with locally sourced homegrown food, pest control, organic fertilizer, and companionship. The downsides have also been noted to be noise and odor potential and disease concerns. So organizations and municipalities across the country do allow them, but they allow them within certain regulations or certain parameters. So if Shorewood were to allow them, we would be within that same boat of identifying under what parameters we find them to be acceptable within the village. Milwaukee has permitted them since 2011, Glendale in 2019. I did get numbers from Glendale this morning. As of this year, they have 4 active permits. Wauwatosa has allowed them since 2013. They have 25 active permits. And Bayside just adopted an ordinance this summer, which I did not find out till this morning. I don't know if they have any permits active or not, but they did just update their ordinance earlier in June or July to allow it. So there's another North Shore community for comparison. Other areas in Wisconsin, Madison has been allowing them for some time, the Fox Valley, which linked to an article that I had in my memo, as well as Waukesha, which actually had been on the news recently with respect to enforcement issues. And so then where we're at here, at least from my perspective, the next steps, what type of public engagement would the Community and Business Relations Committee and or Village Board like to partake with having this discussion? We already did kind of tease the potential of this in this most recent episode of the issue of the Shorewood Today. I'm also happy to write a village manager's memo, including a possible survey or questions within that to publish throughout the fall here to get some more input. We could also recommend it to other committees, whether that's Conservation or Plan Commission or anything in between. And then also, lastly, we would likely hold a public hearing on the matter before consideration of adoption should the committee recommend getting that far. So that's the public engagement side of questions that at least I have in terms of seeking direction. Secondly, I'd be looking to draft an ordinance. Within that ordinance, other communities have limited the number of hens. They've disallowed roosters and slaughtering. They have included conditions for what type of enclosure or coop can be installed, and they have regulations on keeping it clean and sanitary, minimum size and construction standards, the location of that structure to nearby residences. Some communities require neighborhood notice. Some communities allow, some communities prohibit the sale of eggs. And then just administratively, we would look to see which bodies would be enforcing this, whether that's the Planning Development Department, Health Department, Police Department, or otherwise. So that's where we're at. Obviously, you guys can take the conversation in many directions as you'd like, but just from the staff perspective, I'd like to hear more about public engagement so that I can pursue drafting an ordinance potentially to bring back for you at some time in the near future. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. There's nothing. I can figure this out.
Thanks, Bart. And I took a look at both sets of ordinances. I mean, they look pretty close to a copy and paste.
Correct, and they're actually drafted off of Milwaukee's as well. So Milwaukee's bigger, but the smaller communities are still using that kind of same template.
Okay. Could we just have the record reflect that Trustee Stokebrand was able to join?
Sure,
Please.
absolutely.
Hello, Kathy. What's the preference of the committee? Do we want to chat about this first, or we want to get citizen input? Kathy, you're muted. Sorry. I lean towards citizen input. Anybody have an opposition to that?
We just had someone come in just to clear.
Okay. So Bart, can folks raise their hands and then we'll call on one by one?
I think they should be able to, correct? I don't know if I can see it because I'm not the organizer, but Toya still is with us if she can, if I can't.
I will.
Oh, yep, I can see it.
Okay, I can see Dan Wicklund. Okay, so at 6:08, we'll open for community comments. When you're called on to speak, if you could give your full name and your address, we would be most appreciative. And we will just go one after the other. So I see Dan Wicklund first.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Dan Wicklund, 2212 East Menlo Boulevard. I'm calling in. As some of you know, I've been a big fan of this idea for a while. I've bothered some of you about it in the past. When we lived in Milwaukee, we did get chickens the first year that Milwaukee passed the ordinance. I thought the ordinance there was well written and well thought out. It took a lot of input from people there to have it happen in the first place. I think having backyard chickens was a pretty simple task, actually, in general. When people realize how cheap and inexpensive chickens are in general, how they can take your leftover food from your table instead of wasting it, you can feed it to your chickens and actually make eggs out of it. And when you get eggs, 3 eggs a day out of 4 chickens, it ends up being pretty amazing. And the neighbors really liked it a lot. If I had to look at any downsides of this, Bart, you listed some of those in your presentation. If you do not take care of the cage, there will be an odor, but that's with any animal. If someone takes their dog in the backyard and doesn't clean up the poop afterwards, it's going to start to stink after a while. And it's the same thing with chickens, except because it's more contained in that cage, it is a lot easier to clean up. And if somebody does not clean it, though, it definitely would stink. In general, the chickens were a great asset for my family. We had eggs every day. The neighbors really liked them a lot. The chickens, the neighbors were open to having them roam about the yards because the chickens work to pull the pests out of the yard and gardens. They kind of hang out and relax. And at night they go back to their cage and you close it up and they sleep there for the night. So we had no problems the entire couple of years we had chickens with any other pests in the area. You know, people talk about rats and things like that. Maybe it's the area where we lived. You know, that Milwaukee, people will talk about rats from time to time, but we never saw a single one. We never had any pests, never had anything stealing the eggs. The chickens were generally pretty happy. My kids played with them. The only person who was not happy about the chickens was my wife. And that's just because she didn't want to deal with any chickens. But in general, it was a very pleasant hobby, very easy to maintain, and I think it'd be a great asset for Sherwood.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Wicklund. Is it Linda Larman? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. All right, you're next.
I appreciate the pronunciation. I live at 1811 East Elmdale Court, and as opposed to Dan, I do not support this concept. Needless to say, I don't want to jump to rash conclusions. Would have to see what ultimately might be proposed. But in thinking about it, and I, unlike Dan, I haven't raised chickens as an adult, but I did grow up with chickens on a farm. And I'm opposed at this point because of several factors, not necessarily in this order of priority, but I think this idea is a novelty, not a necessity. We in Shorewood are fortunate not to be in a food desert. We have lots of nearby stores that sell free-range eggs, organic eggs, et cetera, et cetera. We have a farmer's market, and there are many other farmers markets in the area. There are CSAs that come to Shorewood. So it's not like we really, really need eggs from chickens raised in our backyards. I'm skeptical about the critters issue. As everybody knows, we have skunks, we have raccoons, we have occasional coyotes and foxes, and I think they could be a problem. I think we live, at least many of us in Shorewood, live in a very dense area. My neighbors are really close, and I fear that this could lead to animosity among neighbors. I looked at the Wauwatosa ordinance. I did not look at Glendale or Milwaukee or others. And I noticed that in Wauwatosa, and I thought this was good in one sense, that if anyone wants to do this, they have to get the consent of their next door neighbors. But, you know, in one sense, that's good. In another sense, it's not good, because in my case, for example, I have a wonderful relationship with my next door neighbors. But if they were to say, we want chickens in our backyard, I would not consent to that. And who knows what that would be like. Or if I had them raising chickens and I had a problem with it, who knows what that would be like. So I think there is the potential for neighbor animosity. And then last, I'll raise the enforcement issue. In my area, I used to have a neighbor, this just ended recently, but had 2 cats who roamed around, which is illegal in Shorewood, of course. And over the course of several years, many of us complained about the cats and tried to get something done about them, and there was no way we got any enforcement. People with the village, including the police, who were the ones to contact, were sympathetic, but nothing was ever done. And I think once the chickens are out of the hen house, so to speak, if there is an ordinance, enforcement would be a difficult issue. And as a taxpayer, I don't particularly like the idea of my village employees spending time on chicken enforcement. So that concludes my comments. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard? President McCaig? Okay. I guess we will close public comments, not having any more comments at 6:15. Oh, Barbara Kiley Miller. Please state your name and address.
Hi, Barbara Kiley Miller, 4051 North Downer. I just have a question. The issue of allowing chickens to be kept in Shorewood backyards came up to the village board on maybe a similar committee, maybe like 2014, 2015. And the board voted against that, or the committee decided not to proceed with that. So I'm just wondering what has changed in the interim in the last 8-9 years, and why that's being considered now. Thank you.
I don't want to speak for anyone else, but it was just a topic that sort of has come back up from my perspective, and folks wanted to talk about it again. And I think that, you know, having the conversation doesn't hurt anyone. And if there are folks in the village who are interested in having chickens, you know, we'll hear them out and take the appropriate votes when necessary. But this particular instance, I believe it was President McCaig who let us know during one of our meetings that she had seen or heard about interest in chickens, and was kind enough to assign it to my committee, and so here we are. So we're having the conversation.
Thanks, Trustee Kudo. Yeah, from the conversations I'm seeing online, it seems to be fairly evenly split between those who are pro chickens and those who love chickens but don't love them in Shorewood. For the idea of having them in such, we do have, except for those lucky enough to live at, maybe off a Lake Drive, we have fairly narrow backyards and lots. The only familiarity I have with chickens is on my cousin's farm, but she has 5+ acres in northern Michigan, and they're free range chickens. But she has lost some to foxes and probably some hawks. And I understand all the concerns that I've read online. So I don't have an opinion that I want to share right now. But was just very curious as to after all the investigation that the board had done previously, why we would even consider it again. Thanks.
Sure. Trustee Stokebrand, I'm just going to see if we have any more from the community, and then we'll go, if that's okay. Any other comments from the community? We've got about 12 minutes left before we have another community meeting. Not seeing any more comments. I'll close it at 6:18. Trustee Stokebrand, you are muted still.
Say it doesn't look like she's muted. Now she has muted herself. I don't know if we're having issues on her end or our end.
I will check that out. One moment.
Cannot hear you now. While we work on that, Jim, is there anything, Trustee Arndorfer, is there anything you wanted to say?
No, I mean, we've seen, some other communities since that last community discussion start to take this up, including, I believe it was Glendale, and I think Bayside more recently. So, I think it's keeping with that, that this is resurfaced. The biggest question I have is around enforcement and what that looks like in practical terms. If something like this were to proceed, given resources, et cetera, based on the number of, licenses or permits you mentioned in other communities, I don't see this, I don't see, Shorewood being, overrun by coops anytime soon if this were to go through. But, and certainly I think in any, ordinance, we would have similar space requirements and upkeep requirements that we've seen in some of the others. So I guess I would just be interested in learning, as we move forward, I would just be interested in learning more about, in practical terms, what force would look like, as well as there's anything to be learned from some of the other communities that have gone down this path. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Seeing there's a chat from Trustee Stokebrand. This is from Trustee Stokebrand in the chat. From previous discussion, are lots too small in Shorewood to allow throughout the village? I had heard the only lots east of Oakland were large enough to accommodate chickens. We are so dense. Bart, do you want to speak to sort of lot size and coop requirements?
Sure. Obviously, yeah, that depends on what regulations we would pass. But within the city of Milwaukee and the city of Wauwatosa, which have similar lots in various locations, I believe the same location requirement is in there. So let me just pull from Wauwatosa's, which I believe is 25 feet from a residential structure, but I kind of want to read it. Yeah. No enclosure or coop shall be located closer than 25 feet to any residential dwelling on an adjacent lot unless consent is given by the owner of the adjacent lot. So you're looking at 25 feet from your neighbor's house. So that is tight in various locations, but it's been doable in Milwaukee and Wauwatosa. I could definitely pull up a neighborhood within the village and confirm that 25 feet is doable. If 25 feet is not doable, maybe that lot doesn't qualify, or maybe we consider changing that or modifying that restriction. But I don't have a specific example offhand, but yeah, it is 25 feet to the residential dwelling. So not the lot line, but the residential dwelling.
Okay. And going back again to the chat for Trustee Stokebrand. If we could not allow throughout the village, we should not allow. is her position. My position, I don't know if this is a problem. Part of me thinks that this is a problem that doesn't exist, looking for a solution. I'm interested in hearing what the possibilities are, what it might look like. I'm not getting the sense that there's a huge groundswell of folks that are looking for chickens. I recognize it's a Monday night and 6 o'clock might not be easy for a lot of folks in the village, but we have one vote for yes and one vote for no from the community. And to me, that doesn't sort of feel like people are wild about this one way or the other. I don't know where I am right now on it. That I don't want to stand in the way if people are really going to be interested in this and are really going to want to do it. But also, Mr. Wickland, I'm sorry, you cannot vote twice. But I don't want to stand in the way. But again, I'm not feeling like this is a fire that the village needs to address. From Trustee Stokebrand, you're going to make me read the word poop in the record. Okay. Does the poop go in a garbage bin? Does the dead chicken go in the garbage bin? What happens to a laying hen that doesn't lay anymore if we don't allow slaughter, take them somewhere else to kill? Looking at the other ordinances from the other communities, there's no slaughtering allowed. I didn't see it addressed where the refuse from the chickens goes. Bart, is that something you have knowledge of?
I do not have knowledge of it, but to Mr. Wickland's point previously, I presume it's treated the same as dog refuse. I don't know. I can definitely double check or answer all these questions. I appreciate the questions. I'm happy to research other communities if they have experience with this. The slaughtering part is a good question. I don't know if you euthanize chickens or what you would do with that, but I can definitely look for answers for all those questions.
Okay. Is there Kathy, if you can, I'll ask the question, and Kathy, if you want to write in the chat. But Jim, is there an appetite to learn more, to go further? Where are you?
I'd be willing to proceed further. I think it's pretty straightforward matter, right? So I don't think we necessarily need to bring in another committee on this unless I'm missing something, but I'd be interested in hearing if there's further community input on it.
Just apologize for my dog. My house has turned into an SIS hangout facility this evening. Trustee Stokebrand, I'm not interested in learning further or spending staff time on this. From my perspective, I'm happy to, Bart, if it doesn't take too much to learn a little bit more and maybe present, some of the issues that Trustee Stokebrand discussed, as well as some of the concerns that the residents have shown. If maybe we could, have another conversation about this at the next meeting. But as far as like drafting an ordinance and going down that road, I'm not there yet. So, and I wouldn't want to have you spend a bunch of time doing stuff if it's not going to lead somewhere. So I guess that's two of us for, can we learn some more? Yeah, go ahead, Bart.
Yeah, is there any appetite for additional, if I did a village manager's memo to get additional questions from the community? So if I kind of put an article in there, ran it for a couple of weeks, asked people to ask me their questions so I could bring those back to you just so we get a better pulse of what other members or residents who couldn't make it tonight. I don't want to do that if you guys don't want to, have me spend too much time on it, but I think that'd be something easy I could put together and then I could get more questions to bring back to you. I'm happy to do that.
I think community engagement is great. So the more the merrier.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
I've got President McKeag with her hand up. Wait, she's gone. Oh, there she is. Okay. So why don't we hear from
Kudo, I just want you to know we have 3 minutes left.
Yeah, 2 minutes, President McKeag, 2 minutes.
Quick question. Didn't we run a survey using social media for something? Was it DPW?
For traffic signals at Kensington, I believe Kensington and Oakland.
So it might be an option as well.
Yeah, I could work with Chris on putting something together. Happy to do that.
Okay. Barbara Kylie Miller, do you have something additional that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, on your list of questions, maybe when you're looking at what other communities have done, look and see how they've addressed the issue of veterinary care. I imagine there aren't that many chickens coming to the Shorewood Animal Hospital when you have a sick chicken. So that's just something to add to your list.
Good
Can
point.
do.
Two good points. Okay, we are at 6:28. Trustee Lynn Arndorfer, Stokebrand, President McKay. Anybody else that I see on here? Anybody have anything else? Trustee Lynn.
Can I have one very quick thing? I am pro chickens in Shorewood. I'm all for it. I think there's a lot of reason that we can do it, and I love the idea. And I'm sorry that I'm late. I have no idea where the discussion was prior to this, but that's my feeling.
Understood. I'm happy to report out in the next meeting as to what happened. But if that is everything, we are up on time. I have a 6:29, so I'll take a motion to adjourn so we're not late for the next meeting. That's a silent motion to adjourn from Trustee Stokebrand. I will second it. Jim, all in favor? Opposed? None. We stand adjourned at 6:29. 1 minute early.
Thank you, everyone.
Are we staying on this link, or is there yet another link?
We're staying on this one.
Okay, I'm going to mute. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Bart.
Toya, do you want to pause the recording so we can start the new one?
Do I hit stop? How do I pause?
Yeah, I'll look at it. I'll take care of it.
Thank you. I'll watch you do it.